You remember Otter 841? That mischievous little otter that was climbing aboard surfboards along Steamer's Lane? Well, on today's episode of Science Solutions Santa Cruz, producer Cassidy Beach guest hosts for a special field diary episode, and she is joined by Gena Bentall, director and senior scientist of Sea Otter Savvy. You're going to go out into the field with Gena and her team to see how scientists are monitoring and tracking these charismatic marine mammals that are so iconic to Monterey Bay. You'll learn about how that science is being conducted, what we're learning, and how these creatures have adapted to share this coastal habitat with us. I'm Jonathan Hicken. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Science Solutions Santa Cruz podcast. I'm Cassidy Beach, your guest host. I'm also a master's student in the UCSC Science Communication program. Today, we have another very special field diary episode, and we are here with Gena Bentall. She is the director and senior scientist at Sea Otter Savvy, and we are actually going to go in the field with her and her team to see how they monitor sea otters, and what other fun things they get up to on a field day. Welcome, Gena, to the podcast. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for inviting me, Cassidy.
Of course. We just met, and I can already tell that this is going to be a really fun episode. I wanted to start by saying that you have one of the coolest jobs, I think. You get to watch, research, and protect some of the cutest critters. How did you find yourself in this role?
Well, that's a long story, so I'll try to give you the nutshell version. So I did my undergrad at Oregon State in Corvallis, and towards the very end, that was for a zoology bachelor's degree, I went to a talk by Dr. Jim Estes, who's really the godfather of all sea otter research and sea otter ecological research and all of the top-down trophic cascade ecology that we understand about them now. And I was just really intrigued by what he spoke about. He's a very engaging speaker, and I started to express more interest in joining his lab and some sea otter research. I was also super interested in marine inverts at the time. And so I was kind of exploring that. And just side note, I was in my late 30s. So as I was finishing my bachelor's degree, I was older than average. And I was competing against, the typical age class of college student for the jobs, the typical kinds of jobs that you get after your undergrad. So I was applying for a bunch of internships, and I just happened to get the Sea Otter research internship working with Jim Estes' doctoral student at the time, who is Tim Tinker, who is now the father of sea otter research.
So I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. I really met Tim and started working for him when he was collecting data for his PhD. So that was my introduction to sea otters. And the cool thing about that is that sea otters are so closely linked to marine inverts. And I also was very fond of marine algae. And so all those three things that is the trophic cascade, the classic sea otter, sea urchin, kelp triad.
So it was the perfect combo for you.
It was perfect. And a lot of what I did in the first 13 years when I worked as a field researcher was watch sea otters forage and identify what they're eating. And of course, they eat marine invertebrates. And the amazing thing about sea otters, which I think is unique, at least among marine mammals, is that they dive to the bottom and they bring their food up and put it on their belly while they eat it. So we just use high-powered telescopes and we can actually observe what they're eating. And so it's like tide pooling otter style. So they're picking up cool things, and they'll just eat all kinds of, we've seen, I think it's probably pushing 100 different species that have been positively identified.
Well, let's get back to your journey. So you were in the internship, correct?
Yeah, so that developed into I became the lead field biologist for that team. So that was on the Central Coast, San Simeon, Cambria. These were sea otters that were tagged. So these were wild otters that were caught wild, tagged, and released where they were caught. So these weren't rehabilitated otters. They were wild otters just doing their own thing. And we would go out every day and try to locate them using the VHF and our knowledge of where they'd been the day before and where they typically were, and look for those flipper tags and get information about where they lived, what they were eating, how long did they live, how many pups did they have, all those kinds of things. And all of the information that we collected has really become essential to what we understand and our knowledge about sea otters today, because we were following known individuals.
Well, and I'm sure that does wonders also having systems like that for public awareness and engagement in sea otter science as well, right?
There's a lot of information that we share with the public, our general knowledge about sea otters that comes from those people, like the work that I did, my team did, and people are continuing to do today. That is founded in those many, many hours of following sea otters.
A lot of us know you for being the founder and director of Sea Otter Savvy.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So for 13 years after that origin story, what I did was go out every day, like I said, and look for these tagged otters. And I worked for the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I worked for the Alaska Sea Life Center on remote projects in Russian Commander Islands. I worked in Alaska, so I worked
so
for
really have had the coolest career.
I have.
I come on.
Can't disagree with you on that. Pretty much anyone who would pay someone to run a field project, I've worked for them in California. I was wrapping up a term position with U.S. Geological Survey, which does the sea otter ecological research in California. And this issue came up. There was a working group that had been formed to address the problem of human disturbance to sea otters. And the working group was comprised of sea otter scientists, agency representatives, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, folks from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, all coming together to kind of try to figure out, troubleshoot this issue of human disturbance, which was incredibly ubiquitous and had achieved a high profile because of some otter cams that were capturing it and were posting that video pretty regularly. So it was really in the public eye.
What sort of disturbances kind of triggered this movement?
Nearly 100% of the time it's kayaks. And I'm definitely not here I'm a kayaker, so I'm not here to defamate kayaks, but that's where the cameras were pointing. And since that time, this is 10 years later today, we've really determined that is accurate. So we're seeing that everywhere. I was very acutely aware of it as a biologist because we had some of our tagged otters that would be out, would be in areas where marine recreation and sea otter habitat overlap. And it turns out years later, that's where we are really focusing our attention. So I had seen it. I was pretty frustrated by it, and I didn't know what the best solution was to that. And so at the time, like I said, there was this working group that was formed, and I was finishing up this term appointment. It was determined that we should start a project, a program. And that was the origin story of Sea Otter Savvy. And because of my availability and my interest, I was chosen to lead that program. And our first funding came from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to start that.
Sea Otter Savvy's main focus is on this interaction between humans and sea otters. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So we initially started out, we're hyper-focused on marine recreation. So that's kayaking, stand-up paddle boards, fishing, eco tours, boating, photography, those kinds of things where people are trying to really get out and experience wildlife. They're not intending any kind of harm. And because they don't have information that can motivate a modification of their behavior, they're unintentionally disturbing sea otters by getting too close. So the general scenario is you have resting sea otters in particular, and a kayaker is out enjoying a paddle in Morro Bay, and they see this raft of sea otters, and typically they want to get video or photos, but they might just get too close because they want to have that experience, that being near a sea otter. They may have come, 1,000 miles just to see sea otters, and their enthusiasm, their love brings them so close that they become an apparent threat to the sea otters, and they will dive and or swim away, and that wastes energy. And that may not be a big deal if it happens once a week, even once a day, probably not a huge deal. But what we found is that it's chronic. So it's recurring over and over again throughout a day in these hotspot areas. And that adds up to an energetic cost. And that is detailed in the publication Energetic Cost of Human Disturbance to Southern Sea Otter that came out in Journal of Wildlife Management in April of last year. So that's our results detailing that from a 10-year data set.
Can you describe energetic costs a little bit more?
Yeah, so sea otters are uniquely vulnerable to human disturbance. And one of the primary reasons for that is their physiology. They're weird marine mammals. So they're more recently adapted back into the marine environment than other marine mammals like whales and dolphins and pinnipeds, and very much more recently. So they haven't had as long of an evolutionary scale to develop adaptations. So they don't have a blubber layer, which is one of the most unique things about them in that group of marine mammals. They don't even lay on fat very efficiently, so typically pretty scant body fat. And so they are what we refer to as capital spenders, not savers. So they are pretty much just using up the energy that they're bringing in by foraging continuously. So that lack of storage capacity, and then their internal high body temperature, which is another one of their strategies for keeping warm, creates a really a metabolism and physiology that is really sensitive to tweaks in their energy expenditure or lack of energy intake. So they can't go very long without food before declining, like a matter of days.
So is that why we see them out and about, like super active more so than other species?
Yeah, they're having to forage, like I said, throughout the day and night. So they'll spend, depending on the status of the population that we're talking about. So what does that mean? How close are they to carrying capacity, or the highest number of otters that the resources, food in particular, in that location can support? If we're at or near carrying capacity, they're competing with other otters for food, and they have to spend more time foraging in order to meet that daily energetic demand. So one of the internet factoids that you hear that's actually true about sea otters, we can talk more about
rare.
the ones that
Yeah.
aren't, is that they have to consume at least 25% of their body weight every day to survive. So if you're a 100-pound human, you would have to eat 100 quarter pounders a day just to get by.
Oh
right?
my
So
God.
they have to, and that's not being delivered by DoorDash, right? They have to go out and swim to
Right,
the
you're
foraging
walking to
spot.
McDonald's every single time
Yes,
you want to go get
and
one.
then you have to swim to the counter and to do your order. You know, it's a lot of it's a lot of work to get that food. So every foraging bout has its sort of energetic cost associated with it. So if you can imagine those otters that we talked about swimming away from the kayaker, it's going to take them some time to recover back to a resting position, and during that time, they're going to be doing some of the most energetically costly behaviors like grooming, swimming, diving, and instead of sleeping, which is the least energetic costly behavior. And then if that happens to them again and again and again, that adds up to a cumulative energetic cost throughout the day. It's a deficit that they have to meet. There's going to be two consequences of that. One is that they feed more. So they have, which, as we've already discussed, comes with its own energetic cost. So they have to eat so many more clams. And that's described in the paper. So many more clams, so many more crabs or whatever to make up for that energetic cost. Or they lose body condition. And when we're talking about animals living in these dense sea otter population areas, that can really become compounded pretty quickly in terms of their health, their vulnerability to other threats, and especially females, their ability to survive to the next reproductive cycle.
Wow. So very compounding consequences that
Absolutely.
just from minor little, hey, I want to snap a photo.
Yeah. And that's one of our biggest challenges is folks just can, in that moment, imagine that their quick paddle in to snag that photo or video is going to have consequences anywhere beyond that one.
So we can't talk about wildlife interaction with otters without talking about Otter 841.
These are the latest mugshots of Otter 841, America's most wanted marine mammal. Last summer, she terrorized surfers in Santa Cruz, California, biting boards, even hijacking them. Now she's back, and surfers are on the lookout.
First, how were you feeling when this all went down? And also, how common are these interactions?
So there's a gradient of interactions. So one of the consequences of this overlap between sea otters and humans in these areas of high frequency of marine recreation is habituation. So there's just, especially if you have a pup and they've grown up their whole life in an area and that's what they're used to.
Meaning they're just like used to humans being around and...
Yeah, to put it in slightly more, I guess, jargony terms, their threshold of fleeing becomes shorter and shorter and shorter, so that they're less, the person has to be almost right on top of them before they're going to feel threatened and dive away. And that's an adaptive response to everything that I just explained about energy balance, right? So they know, okay, I don't have to waste energy. I don't have to waste energy. Oh gosh, it's
now
too
I
close.
do.
Now it's too much. And they just develop habits of interacting with kayakers. The case with Otter 841 was pretty extreme. So I would say that was on the upper level of interactions, undesirable interactions with humans and bold otter behavior. The fact that she was female was pretty consistent. The fact that she was pregnant, their hormonal cycles seemed to be involved. Those were two signs that were very consistent with other similar behavior that we'd seen. She lives in an area of the coast where she cannot go anywhere without encountering a human. She's found a place where her foraging is productive for her, and that's a really important choice for a female because they need to be able to meet that extra reproductive energetic demand. And that foraging place and her resting place is very proximate to a very, very busy area for human recreation. So we have surfers, we have kayakers, we have boaters, we have swimmers, we have all kinds of different, what we call in our data collection, stimuli. It's not entirely surprising that she developed that kind of behavior.
So what was Sea Otter Savvy's overall look at 841? Like, what did you guys do to combat like all the new disturbances that you guys were seeing?
So we worked with colleagues to put out messaging. So you can still find messaging from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who's the governmental agency that is responsible for the recovery and conservation of southern sea otter as a federally listed threatened species. We worked together to create the like a press kit kind of thing. And there's a web page that you can go to that talks a little bit about bold otters and special tips for them. Because think about this. What am I trying to tell people most of the time? Stay away. Stay away or you're going to disturb them. So here we have to flip that on its head. The otter is coming to them. And now I have to say, or we have to say, this is up to you to prevent this interaction for the good of that animal and for your own safety. And that's a really hard
that makes things
dichotomy.
tricky.
Yeah, and so people are thinking when they're in a kayak, let's just use another example that's not 841. Otter climbs on your kayak. You've been told you are not to touch these animals. Like there's all kinds of fines, and like, what do you do? And we have to, for them to make the right choices, either one, they already have to be kind of wildlife savvy, which I really encourage people to be, or two, they have to have somehow gotten our message about this from either directly from us in our social media or a press release or whatever, or through the kayak shop staff that we work with very, very closely. And I want to be sure we talk about them at some point, but they've delivered a message about that. So it's if they haven't had that, then they have an otter in their kayak and they are either terrified and don't know what to do, or they are enraptured and filming it for social media. That is a really tricky problem, and I'm glad that it isn't more frequent than it actually is.
All right. Well, I think that we should go see it for ourselves.
Okay.
We're going to go to West Cliff.
Awesome.
Lighthouse Point with your volunteers, correct?
Yep.
All right, and let's go see what you guys do in the field.
Let's go.
All right, everybody, we are here in the field with Gena and her team of volunteers. As you can see, it's a beautiful and very windy day here on West Cliff. We're looking down at Steamer Lane. There's tons of surfers here and tons of otters too, so this is great. Gena, can you describe what we're here for today?
So we are here to do a data collection session that is part of our long-term monitoring of human disturbance to sea otter. Every week, we have a team that will come to any one of we have 5 active sites throughout the Central Coast, so all the way down to Avila Beach, Port St. Louis. But here today, they're gonna be here for 2 hours, and they're doing a scan sampling method. So every 15 minutes for that 2-hour period, they're gonna scan from left to right this kelp bed that we can see right out here. They're looking for otters, and they're gonna be accounting for where the otters are, how big the group is, what are the otters doing, and they're looking for what we call stimuli. And that's anything that could provoke a behavior change in the sea otters, potentially. So looking out here, our stimuli options are surfers, lots of surfers.
Right.
We have a couple of kayak fishermen.
Some sailboats?
Yeah, sailboats. Yeah, so we have lots of activity in this area. They're going to be looking for those things during each of those scans, but they don't actually determine whether a disturbance has taken place. Yeah.
Why do otters kind of link up in these rafts? What are they doing?
Resting is very important. So getting together, resting, increasing the security of the raft by being with others.
Okay.
And there's also a social component to it as well. So you might see animals resting together that might typically be in that same raft from day to day. And they'll do little social behaviors, smelling each other, greeting each other. So social is probably part of it as well, but resting is the primary behavior that we're going to see.
Okay.
So this is a perfect example of a typical kayak sea otter raft interaction that we might see. The team behind me here is going to be measuring the distance between that kayaker and the raft of otters, and they're going to be monitoring how those otters react to that kayak. So
yeah, because they're getting pretty close now.
They are, and I can't tell for sure if they're using a camera. Are they using?
They're just looking.
They're just looking. Are the otters? Looks like the otters just flushed. So that was a full flush, which means that the group vigilance worked. That one otter said, that's it, that's as close as you're gonna get. We're worried, dove, and the whole raft dove. So it will probably take them about 10 to 20 minutes to recover, to groom back their fur layer, that air layer in their fur again, and go back to sleep. So
20 minutes. Wow.
yeah. During that time, they're expending energy grooming and losing that resting time. Yeah, okay. So it started with how many?
7.
7. Okay, so
Oh my
we
gosh,
lost
there's so
3.
many.
That group was 7 before the flush, and now it's 4. So 3
Really?
of them took off and just decided it wasn't worth
Sticking around?
going back to sleep, and they probably started foraging.
Jeez. Yeah, I feel like it's a double-edged sword because you want people to come to this area and have these experiences with sea otters, with all these other creatures, so they have a sense of care and compassion for them.
Yes. Yes. So you've really hit on the central core of our outreach in that we're hoping to build and foster people's environmental identity. That is how they perceive their place in their environment or their ecosystem or their neighborhood or community, including all of the wild components that are part of that. And that really is the cornerstone for building that compassion, that respect, that stewardship that is our final goal. So I think it's a better, more enriching, and more satisfying outdoor experience if you're allowing wildlife space to thrive than going out and not really thinking about what your impact is.
And I think empowering locals here
Yeah.
that have already gotten your messaging,
Yeah.
understand how to behave around sea otter responsibly is really important.
Yes, absolutely.
And having them relay your guys' message so everybody knows,
Yeah.
hey, when you're near these critters,
Yeah.
this is what we should be doing. This is how we act.
Here we can see that the surfers, while there's a lot of them, are really quite far away. And this is not where sea otters are going to be resting. So what we typically see is that surfers just coexist in the waves. And a lot of times, especially if we have a lot of locals out here, they're really super aware of the sea otters. They're great stewards, they're protectors. They have a lot of respect for the other creatures that are living in the ocean with them and enjoying this area with them. And so they really have the sort of model coexistence attitude that really makes things work when you have
awesome to
sea
hear.
otters and any kind of wildlife and humans overlap. But these guys are doing a great job of respecting sea otters and letting them have their place in the lineup here, if you will.
Yeah. All right, what do you say we head back?
Okay, let's go.
Awesome.
All right, we are back in the studio now. We were just at Lighthouse Point watching some otters and some surfers at Steamer Lane. We got to see quite a bit of interaction and some cool behaviors from sea otters today. So we know that sea otters are these super cute little critters. Can you talk a little bit more about why they're ecologically important?
Sea otters probably are most well known for their cuteness. The person that ended up being my graduate school advisor was Dr. Jim Estes, and he pioneered research in the Aleutian Islands in the 70s, looking at places where sea otters were and where they were no longer. And why were they no longer there? That's a product of the maritime fur trade of the 17 and 1800s that decimated the global sea otter population and left it quite patchy. So in the Aleutian Islands themselves, he could find islands that had sea otters and those that didn't. And what he discovered was the ecosystems of the islands with sea otters differed quite dramatically from those that did not. And the relationship that he described as a cause for that is this one called a trophic cascade between a sea otter as a predator, a sea urchin as both a prey species and an herbivore, and kelp. And so this relationship can be revealed if you remove one of those elements. And so sea otters were removed by the fur trade, and urchins became more abundant, and they changed their behavior They became less shy about going out and looking for food because there was not a predator around to pick them off. And they also became hungrier because there were more of them. So they had to travel all around and just became like little Roombas mowing down the kelp.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And I'm sure a lot less kelp too then.
Oh, yes. So they're eating the kelp. And normally they would eat little bits that were just like floating into the crevices where they were hiding from sea otters.
Right. But now they can just
go
out.
out and about, and they're mowing off they're eating off the kelp at the hold fast. The urchins are living on the rocks on the bottom, and so that breaks off and floats away, and then they just continue eating until there's really nothing left but a hard crust of encrusting algae, which is not very palatable or edible. So, and then that's not great for them. They're starving, essentially, but that habitat is pretty stable in the absence of that predator. So when sea otters are there, they're keeping those numbers down, and the kelp forest flourishes, and it becomes much more biodiverse, rich,
Everyone's in
and
check.
stable.
Yeah.
So that again is another stable system. So that was really the first understanding of why the role that sea otters play, and then they became defined. They're one of the first two species defined as keystone species. And the other was the ochre sea star, Pisaster acracius.
Can you explain a little bit more about like what is a keystone species?
Okay, so if everyone can envision they're walking into an old stone building from 100, 200, 300 years ago, and there's an arch at the entrance. And at the top of that stone arch is a keystone. And all of the other stones in that arch are pushing up or deriving support from that keystone. Imagine if you pull that keystone out, what happens to the rest of the arch? It collapses. So a keystone species has that level of impact on their surrounding environment. So if you pull them out, it's going to create dramatic changes in the relationships between the other species and the magnitude of those relationships, and just can cause a really dramatic change. And we've learned a lot about the keystone relationships of the Pisaster star too, and that's interconnected to sea otters. So all of these are really tightly interwoven with one another, and humans are a big part of that. And one of the ultimate conceits of humans is that we kind of want to separate ourselves from these ecosystems and animals and non-human animals, but we are definitely part of that ecosystem, and it's to our own detriment to deny that.
Yeah.
We're a keystone species.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk about some of the guidelines. So how close is too close? What do you do if an otter hops on your kayak or approaches you while you're surfing?
There's one step that you cannot avoid, and it makes all of the other ones easier. And that step is paying attention. Making a pledge to yourself, I'm going to pay attention to wildlife that I'm seeing and how it's behaving and how it's responding to me, is not only going to prevent disturbance, it's going to enrich your experience.
Right.
Because you're really observing in the moment what you're seeing, what they're doing, seeing animal behavior. So that's the first one. So let's talk about distance. We don't love having to recommend a distance because distance is variable. So if you're talking about the laws, the federal laws under the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act that protects sea otters, there is no distance, official distance. It's the distance at which you cause a disturbance to their behavioral patterns.
But how do you know that? You see them
you
change the
have to pay
behavior?
attention, yes. So sea otters and most wildlife will give you a very clear warning sign that you're getting too close. And you don't have to be an animal behaviorist to recognize it. It's looking at you. So a sea otter might be sleeping, and then they turn their head and they look at you. That is the first sign that you've entered their world and they have noticed your presence, and that's your stop sign. The absolute minimum distance that you should get to resting sea otters is 5 kayak lengths. So we're using kayak because, as I mentioned earlier, it's the number one source of disturbance by far. People can't estimate distance very well. I'm not able to very well. And so 5 kayak lengths. We recommend really 8 kayak lengths, but 5 for these hot spot areas where sea otters are pretty habituated is sufficient. So that's our general recommendation. If you have to have a distance, it's about 20 meters, 60 feet.
And then, to my understanding, Sea Otter Savvy also has a certification and recognition program for businesses.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
It's my favorite program of ours. It's called Community Active Wildlife Stewards, or CAWS, CAWS. And it recognizes and rewards marine recreation businesses for their wildlife stewardship in their business practices. So they have they provide information to customers that are renting a kayak. They have an orientation period that includes information about wildlife. They have visual cues in their shop to help people visualize what some of these guidelines are. Their advertising is not promoting close encounters with wildlife. So one of my least favorite phrases to see in any kind of a wildlife tourism advertisement is up close and personal. If you've got that in your ad, you're going to have to take it out to get certified.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they are already demonstrating that they're incredible stewards. And we had, when we really launched the program in 2019, we had businesses in mind. So they were the ones that we already knew were doing this. And we try to keep this a living program with a living framework that is adaptable to input from the participants, so we can make sure that we're not only helping wildlife, but we're supporting them in their business practices and promoting them and making this a program that works for them. So we have something that is supporting the businesses, and we have something that's supporting the wildlife, and then the overlap of that Venn diagram is community and supporting the community in general, of which wildlife are a part.
So everyone's benefiting.
Everyone's benefiting. So, and the consumer is benefiting because they receive information like these are the businesses that we are certifying are very responsible and demonstrating active stewardship. So active stewardship, you are taking a part in trying to mitigate any impact that your business might have on the environment, and you're also educating your customers about the importance of the environment and sea otters. And it's not just about sea otters, it's about all the wildlife they might encounter.
You had mentioned rewards?
Yeah, so the great thing about us being a nonprofit is that we don't have the limitations of the governmental agencies in terms of promoting a specific business or entity. We can go ahead and do that. So we'll promote them on our website, on our social media, so that they get the notice and the recognition that they deserve, and to help consumers identify them. So that is part of it. We have materials, so swag for them. They get stickers. So we have 5 different versions of our logo. We have a sea otter, we have a humpback whale, we have a harbor seal, we have a brown pelican, and we have a sea hare, which is my favorite. And they can choose any or all of those logos to apply to their business physically or digitally on their website or in their social media.
Okay.
They have a flag that they can fly. So this recognizable logo helps people to identify that this is a CAWS certified wildlife steward.
Yeah. Now, if I'm, as a consumer, going out trying to find a company to go on a kayak tour with,
Mm-hmm.
you just described the little logo. Will it say like Sea Otter Savvy or CAWS on it? Like, what will it say? How do I?
It will say certified wildlife steward.
Okay.
And I do recommend people can go to our website and find information about our stewardship program. And it has a gallery of all of these certified businesses.
Yeah, I even saw some independent photographers on there too. What a great idea.
Yes. So wildlife photography has, we've noticed over the last 10 years that it shows up pretty frequently in our research.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really want to reach out to photographers. I'm not just talking about people with their phones, but professional wildlife photographers. And so, yeah, we have 3 of those on our cause list right now. They're really great, and they're super great at engaging with other photographers. And you'll also see us talk a lot about photographs of sea otters. So those 2 things are linked together. So we're wanting to be sure that sea otter photography favors imagery that's not the result of disturbance, and that photographers are keeping that distance, just as I explained, like anyone else would need to do, and not exploiting that ability to get close in order to get a photograph.
All right.
Yeah.
So now that Santa Cruz knows about it, we need more of you guys certified.
Absolutely. And it's a voluntary program. It's actually really, really
no
easy.
Cost.
No cost. No cost whatsoever. In fact, we provide all the materials. If they reach out to me, that becomes my burden. By the time they reach out to me, I have to start the review process. So that's really more my work. And it really doesn't require them to do a lot. And one of the other rewards is that if we're doing a program like this, or we're doing a film, we're often involved in film productions, videos, other special media things that are coming through town, we are going to feature our cause members first. So they're the ones that are going to be involved. Yeah. So that is another reward of being involved with the program.
That's great.
You know, if you haven't visited the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz in a while, or ever, you really should come visit us. We are right on the bluffs of the beautiful Monterey Bay, with an aquarium full of local species and a bunch of hands-on science exhibits that help you understand what's happening in our ocean and along our coast. We are connecting the incredible research happening at UC Santa Cruz with real-world solutions for our coastal community. We don't want science to just sit on a shelf. We want it to shape decisions, inspire kids, and help our community feel equipped to act. So if you care about the future of our ocean and our coastal community, or you just want to experience a place that makes you feel a little more connected to it, come visit us at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Science Solutions, Santa Cruz.
Okay, so it's obvious that sea otters are super important for the oceans and ecosystems. What can people do to get involved?
When it comes to human disturbance, it is really easy for people to make a difference. They can do it in an instant. So one thing they can do is, if they're out recreating, whatever form that takes, near the ocean, in the sea otter's home, they can pay attention and give space, and just be thoughtful about that interaction and respectful of these animals. And I just want to follow that up with one quick caveat. So I'm often asked, well, what if an otter pops up right next to you? What do you do?
Yeah.
So if you're paddling, especially in Elkhorn Slough, a foraging sea otter might pop up with a fat innkeeper worm right next to you. Just, keep paddling, be quiet. If they're in front of you, stop paddling forwards. What we're mostly concerned about, though, are the resters, because that is that energy change from sleeping and conserving energy to an active behavior and using the most energy that they can possibly use for a behavior. So
you're saying if you see an otter resting or sleeping,
they need the most space and respect.
Right. Okay.
Yes. One of the other things I often bring up is picking up trash. So especially plastic trash. Sea otters are very clever with their paws, curious, especially when they're young, and they'll pick up trash just like they would an urchin or a shell or whatever, and they can become, involved with that trash in ways that we don't love to see.
Involved in what way? Like, they won't try and eat it, will they?
I've seen them try to eat plastic stuff before. I was just telling a story about a sea otter that was trying to break her muscles on a beer bottle, and the beer bottle shattered. And we've seen pups tangled in clothing or a trash bag. And the number one thing that I encourage people to pick up is stray fishing line. And the challenge is it's hard to see. You have to have a search image for what fishing line looks like, because it's thin and clear. It looks kind of like seaweed. And the other challenge is it often has a hook attached to the end of it.
But all the more reason to pick it up.
If you can carefully dispose of that properly, there are actually recycling, there PVC tubes for recycling fishing line, where you can dispose of it properly, at least in a trash can. And then finally, just a little plug for those that are out working towards sea otter conservation. Nonprofits like Sea Otter Savvy need your help. It's an especially challenging climate financially for nonprofits right now. So your donation is always appreciated. Doesn't have to be us, but whoever is doing the hard work to protect sea otters or other wildlife for the coastal ecosystem. There's a lot going on right now. So that kind of segues into the next point where sharing their voice can also be helpful. So, we have threats to the Endangered Species Act. I think that is officially going to change definitions coming up. And so we lost that battle, but we can still stay vigilant and be sure that our representatives know how we feel about protecting species and protecting habitat and recovering threatened and endangered species. So share your voice. Your voice is powerful, and it can really make change. And I think we need it now more than ever.
I think that's a great ending to our conversation today. What do you say we end with a fun lightning round of questions?
Okay, now I'm nervous.
First question. If you weren't studying and protecting sea otters as your career, what would your alternate reality career be?
It could have easily been marine invertebrates. So hanging out in tide pools was a fork in the road.
Yeah. Second question, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received about protecting wildlife? Or just in general?
The best piece of advice I've ever received is to remember to listen, especially in my earliest days, just starting these conversations with stakeholders, businesses, partners. It can at times be extremely feel alluring to share your point of view and your opinion, and really the most effective way to engage with people and to bring them in as partners is to really listen to their story and their perspective. And I think that's the most valuable lesson I've learned in the last decade. And that applies across all of my life.
Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, what is your favorite outdoor spot in the Monterey Bay area?
I'm going to say the Peninsula Coast. So Pacific Grove. There's some incredible beauty there.
Yeah, there is.
I think it might be a little bit around the peninsula, but one of my favorite places is on the 17-mile drive. It's an incredible stretch of coastline, and just bring your noticing with you. So you're really looking for wildlife. You can see sea otters, you can see harbor seals, sea lions, maybe a stellar sea lion, whales of different kinds, pelagic dolphins like Riso in one spot. Like it's and I'm not even talking about the birds and the invertebrates. So it's just a really incredible, beautiful place, and we're lucky to be so close.
Number 4, one book, documentary, series that you would recommend to someone interested in wildlife or environment.
So I highly recommend, we talked about Dr. Jim Estes. He has a book called Serendipity, which is his story of those early days of discovering that ecological relationship. It's very engagingly told, lots of interesting stories. And so I recommend that particular book to read. There's a film called The Serengeti Rules, and it is available to stream free on PBS. So if you go to Nature on PBS, please do not pay to stream this movie, because you can stream it free through PBS. And that features these early days of the keystone species and understanding the role of predators in ecosystems. And one of the scientists that's featured is Dr. Estes and Dr. Payne, who worked together to develop those first definitions of keystone. There's a reason why I'm talking about this book and this movie. We lost Dr. Estes early this year, and I really want him to be remembered and his legacy of work. And a lot of knowledge that we have about kelp forest ecosystems is really, really the origin story of that is with him. So become familiar, remember who he was and the work that he did. And those are also an engaging story and a really, really cool, beautiful film that will educate you about those subjects.
All right, last question. What gives you the most environmental hope right now?
If I don't have hope, I can't get out of bed in the morning. So my hope lies in the people that we partner with. I'm actually getting goosebumps right now. The stewards that we work with, the community active wildlife stewards, the kids, the community, other community members, in whatever way you want to define that, the tribal members, the fishermen, the people that are really caring about the environment and want to do right by it. They rock my world, man. They are what keep me going because they are so inspiring. One of my favorite things to do is I'm doing it Friday. I'm going to give a talk to the staff of all the local marine recreation businesses. It's a webinar now, so I talk to them all at one time. And there is nothing I like doing more because I'm so excited to see passionate people that are not just caring about the environment, but taking an active role in preserving and protecting it. That keeps me going. The other thing is the resilience of sea otters. So sea otters, as I mentioned, were nearly wiped out. So from hundreds of thousands to a couple thousand throughout the northern Pacific, and they're recovering. The population that's struggling the most is our southern sea otter here in California. So that's been the slowest to recover, but they have survived a lot. They can survive a lot. And I am continually, this is 25 years that I've been working with sea otters, never tired of watching individuals and what they're doing and what they're eating and how they survive under unbelievable pressures and circumstances. So those two things together, the resilience of sea otters and the passion and action of people who care, are what keep me going.
Those are two really good reasons. I always say passion's contagious.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and teaching us all how to be a better neighbor to our otters here.
You're
It was
welcome.
a pleasure to have you on.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much, Cassidy.
All right, that does it for the pod. Thank you to Gena Bentall for coming into the studio and taking Cassidy out to the field. Thank you to the entire team at Sea Otter Savvy for everything that you're doing. Thank you to Cassidy Beach for guest hosting and for getting the footage out in the field once again. And of course, thank you to Edith Belmont for editing and Valerie Situ for distribution and socials. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.